Hello, thank you so much for joining us today for our virtual Center Sundays. My name is Sierra McKissick, and I'm the Public Programs Coordinator at the Hyde Park Arts Center. We've been doing this virtual Center Sunday for about a year now. It was something we started in person last March, and we were able to have one in person. It's a day where we're taking over the Art Center essentially, but now we're taking over the virtual world and having art making activities, residency talks, and exhibition conversations, and all kinds of things that speak to the Arts Center. And we are proud to present this ground floor program today. We will be having a film screening with three of our ground floor artists and a talk back and Q&A at the end as well for you all to engage with some of the artists and their work. And first up, we have a great artist, Kayla Anderson. And let me tell you a bit about Kayla. So Kayla Anderson is an interdisciplinary artist, a critical writer, a sometimes curator, a precarious administrator, and an aspiring educator. Her visual practice is time-based, spanning video and new media, performance, installation, and publication. Through art, she practices ways of being with the world, of uncovering its curiosities and rubbing up against its contradictions. Her recent work explores the ways that culture and subjectivity shaped and are shaped by technology. She grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and attained her first DSL internet connection when she moved to Chicago in 2009 to attend the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Her work has been shown at in spaces throughout the US, Vietnam, Singapore, and Australia. She often spends time staring intimately into the eyes of insects. Everyone, please say hello to Kayla. We also have Forrest Simmons. Forrest Simmons is an artist working with photography, video, and sound. He is an alumnus of the International Center of Photography's CE track and advanced CE track programs. In 2020, he received an MFA in photography from Columbia College of Chicago, where he was the recipient of a graduate fellowship, as well as the John Mulvaney and Bob Thal Scholarship in Photography. His most recent body of work, A Lush and Ferocious Wilderness, is currently featured in the Hyde Park Art Center's ground floor biennial in Chicago, which we will be seeing today. Everyone say hello to Forrest. And lastly, but definitely not least, we have Atifa Farjolazadeh. They are an Iranian immigrant visual artist who employs photography, video, and writing in her practice. She currently works on a project that explores the idea of being elsewhere and the psychology of being in between the place of origin and her new place. Her work oscillates between abstraction and representation, fiction and nonfiction. Fajol Lajadeh received an MFA in photography from Columbia College Chicago. Her work has been selected for Ground Floor 2020 Hyde Park Art Center's biennial exhibition in Chicago, Filter Photo in Chicago, Photo Filmics, JRNL7, and CICA Museum in South Korea, amongst others. Everyone, please say hello to Atifa Farjo Lazadeh. Well, thank you so much. We've introduced all of the artists. We are going to be seeing some of these films directly. I'm going to share my screen so that you all can check them out as well. And first up, we have Kayla Anderson. And Kayla, did you have anything that you'd like to say about your film before anyone would like to see, or any relaxing words of encouragement or anything of that sort?
No, we can watch it, and I'll talk about it later during the Q&A.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Until the age of 5, I believed I didn't exist. Or more precisely, I found the concept of 7 billion people roaming the earth, each with an individual body and consciousness, excessive and therefore absurd. This phase began sometime between 1 and 2 years of age, when in the middle of the night I had escaped from my crib by hoisting myself over the side and sliding down to the floor. In the process, I obtained a cut spanning a straight line from my armpit to my ankle. What I remember next is my mother applying ointment, the two of us standing in front of a narrow mirror. When I watched this happen through the mirror, I saw my body as if I were floating above it. Whatever I had been before, I concluded then that I was certainly not my body, nor a contained being at all, but perhaps part of some massive untethered subjectivity projected onto matter as a screen. My mom often tells a story about driving with my sister and I in the car, around the age of 3. I asked her to stop at a crosswalk where a man we saw regularly was crossing, slow and labored due to a missing leg. I told my mom that I wanted her to let me out of the car so that I could become this man's leg. What she took for sympathetic metaphor, I probably meant as physical reality. I believed I was malleable. I could leave my body at any time and become something else as soon as I found good enough reason. Over the years that followed, I submitted myself to several exercises that I hoped would help me achieve my true formlessness. Often I would start by closing my eyes and picturing myself from above in my precise physical location, and then imagine zooming outwards in large shifts of scale, passing by the earth, the universe, and landing in endless darkness. I would try to imagine something that could contain all of these things, something omnipotent, invisible, and undefined. I tried to feel myself disappear. These thoughts devolved into simpler ones. Perhaps I was asleep, plugged into an illusion, and would wake up one day to find my life had all been image. At some point, I decided I had to tuck these thoughts away. The simulation hadn't ended yet, so I might as well try to enjoy it. If I wanted to get along in this world of people who believed they existed, I'd be better off at least pretending to feel the same.
All right. Thank you so much for enjoying that film with us by Kayla Anderson. Definitely would love to hear some feedback from Kayla about the film. I have a couple of questions myself for you as well. But Kayla, how about you tell us a bit about what we just watched?
Yeah, sure. And I'll try not to, I didn't want to talk about it too much before to not give it away because it's somewhat straightforward. But yeah, this video was made in 2019. It actually started in sort of a, I guess similar to the way the narrative happens, where one night I couldn't sleep and I had just gotten finally a somewhat, well, it wasn't up to date, but a newer iPhone and found that I could wander Google Street View, and I randomly picked a place in Lithuania because Jonas Mekas had just died and I was thinking about him. And when I looked down, I saw a shadow. And so I kind of went on this like journey searching for places where it's only places that haven't been documented officially by Google, where you can find people's own uploads, and kind of looking for these fragments. But yeah, and it came at first, before it was a video, it was an essay that was part of a series called Active Denial Systems. And so each of the essays was about the denial of the body, or ways in which the materiality of our bodies gets denied for, in this case, the image of the body, to kind of create this like objective and at times sort of like ethnographic image where the photographer is removed. But there were other essays in that series as well. So yeah, but I would love to answer.
Yeah,
any
I definitely
questions
was
or
curious
comments.
about how you went down the rabbit hole of finding street views, as I know that myself, oftentimes I'll look at like my old childhood home or
Mhm.
different things. Like I've talked to people about how you can go anywhere in the world essentially through Google and walk down a street. So it's interesting to hear that it was kind of a late night musing and you
Mhm.
kind of tumbling down this road. But I'm also curious about the beginning of the video and how you chose to personify the body or people through the use of shapes and also the use of sound included in that. Can you describe some of those choices to start the film off?
Yeah, the animation at the beginning is based on, as it's revealed later, based on the like
Hmm.
sort of interface of taking or maybe it's not obvious. I mean, I only found out through researching because I had never done this, but
Yeah.
when you take a panorama, there's this interface that you're given on your phone that's like, okay, point the camera at the dot and you're sort of in this
Yeah.
box. And so I decided to use those symbols to try to communicate this story that otherwise I think would be really hard anyway to illustrate,
Mhm.
because it's so much about like a mental process or imagining or belief. Um, I don't know if that answers
Yeah,
the.
no, I thought that it was really clever in the use of that and how you had the voiceover and you weren't technically seeing something that the person was talking about, but you're introduced to this larger theme and idea as well. And I love the use of sound in it also, like that camera. There's something satisfying about the circle going into the other circle and then hearing that click also. So I love kind of that illusion that you made there as well.
And
And I've
there's one.
also, oh,
Oh,
sorry, what were you gonna
I
say?
was just gonna say there's one camera click. I mean, there's been a few versions of this video, but there's one of the camera clicks is a lyrebird doing a camera click,
Yes.
which is where the birds at the beginning and end come from, and then
Yeah, I was also curious about that, how some of the videos or street views that you showed also included sound over them. Were those sounds that you found or kind of placed there?
there isn't any sound. There were some actually, which was I thought was nice. There was some like ambient background sound from us in the Zoom.
Okay, so some
Um,
extras, yeah.
but there isn't any sound. That is something, when I revisited the video, I made it in 2019. When I revisited it, I was like, oh, maybe I should add in some atmospheric sound. But of course, there
Yeah,
is no sound when you're like in the
yeah,
software of recording. Everything's recorded on my phone.
okay.
So there aren't sounds.
Oh, that makes sense
Um,
then.
but yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But
And I
maybe there will be sound.
yeah, because there was one where there were like two men, and I was like, oh, this is awesome to like hear the person talking. And I was like, that finding out that that's not part of it. But I'm also interested in the quote that was said, denied their identity, but not their existence, and how this speaks to larger themes of surveillance for you. And how did this become of interest? I know you worked on the essay first before the film. So could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the thing I was most struck by when I was seeing this was just the way that I kind of said it before, but that people are agreeing, maybe not knowledgeably or like thinking about it so much, but they're agreeing in the way that they're asked to choreograph themselves and taking this image. They're like agreeing to erase themselves. Um, but other people can stay in the photos, and there's a lot of instruction about how to how to blur them out. And so they're allowed to like be in there existing in the frame as people, as long as their identity um is gone. But with the panoramas, you do see always the name of the, even though it's mostly like sometimes it's like a sign on, but the name of the person who's making it is always at the top. So their identity is there, but then their body is supposed to be gone. And often they get removed. So a lot of these, when I went to go find them later, were gone, because they still have someone's body in them. They're like not really considered by Google to be, I don't know, accurate, or so they take them down.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you have specific types of themes that you were looking for particularly or places that you wanted to explore?
Um, Well, I was just looking actually for any kind of body fragment, be it a shadow, hands, and then kind of categorizing them. But the thing that was interesting was I had to find, like, unlike I guess when you're just going around on Google Maps thinking like, oh, the places I would love to be, which is a thing that I think happened or happens. But also I had to think like, oh, okay, I had to just kind of click around and see where is there not already documentation, which happens for various reasons. It's like some places they're not allowed to go, some places they can't go. Um, and so I had to just kind of see where there were these panoramas clicking all over the world. Like I found one, I found like one in Illinois in Schaumburg, and
Nice.
like I think maybe one or two others in the US, but otherwise it was really hard because Google has like totally mapped this entire country.
Everything. Wow.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it was a pursuit that was driven by finding places that weren't mapped in an official capacity by Google.
Well, that makes sense. I was also curious about your use of metaphor and how you use the conquistador reference and also the yoga reference. Why did you choose to create sort of those parallelisms or connections in the film?
Yeah, the that quote about the conquistadors is from a book by Bruno Latour called "We Have Never Been Modern," which I really, even though it's like it's a strange and like jarring quote. The thing that I have always appreciated about it is that it shows, it like reverses this, or at least for me, it reverses this like assumption about colonization that the people who were being colonized didn't have their own agency and worldviews that they were also like kind of encountering and experimenting with. And so so the reason for like what he's kind of saying there is that the Spanish came with this idea that, oh, well, everyone and thing has a body, but some people don't have souls. And to the Amerindians, they were like, that's ridiculous. Like, there are tons of souls, but like, not all souls have a body. And it's like, so do you people have, so there is this like, which I think, so they were
Yeah,
also performing their own, they were testing their own worldviews in the same way against the conquistadors.
yeah, definitely.
And so, and then the yoga one, I mean, most of my writing and narrative comes from life. And at the time I was at Northwestern and they have free yoga classes. So I was going, and then one day the teacher said like, oh, if you're having trouble staying in your body. And I was like, oh, what a weird, like it was while I was writing this. And it was like, oh, that's such a strange, and she said to close your eyes. But when you close your eyes, like you sort of are, it's like, are you in your butt? I don't know. So it
Yeah,
just
'cause
was a
your mind
strange,
is elsewhere. Yeah.
it was a strange thing to me. And she would have people like do this sort of powers of 10, like where you are now, then zoom outward and outward. And it seemed very um, computer, or like, there was also a thing once, which was in another like alternate ending of the video, the same teacher had said something like, oh, focus on the black screen on the inside of your forehead. And I was like, that's such a it's such a like computer media reference. So I guess
Yeah.
I was interested in that. Those things I inserted just to think about the ways that our interactions with technology have even affected perhaps our imaginations or the ways that we think of being in our bodies.
Mhm.
But yeah. Um,
Yeah. No, I think that's a great kind of end note to end on, thinking about how technology influences our ability in our body with the context of the film. And Mariella has a question about if it's your voice in the video.
Yeah, it's not me. At the end, you can get the, I'll type it too, but it's Anya Smolnikova. I'll type her name. I'm always bad at spelling when I'm on the go. The narrator is Anya Smolnikova, who is an artist in Chicago. And yeah, when I'm working with narrators, I always try to find someone who has some kind of relationship to the the text. And so she was, I mean, it's just, we had talked about this sort of idea of not existing or these like, I guess like childhood metaphysical conundrums. But yeah, Anya has been in a lot of my work,
Oh, that's
including my
awesome.
most recent film. So yeah.
Thank you so much for
But thanks
sharing.
everyone.
Thank you, Kayla. All right, and next up, we have a film from Atifa Farajod-Lazadeh. Just wanted to make sure I pronounce it right, and I'll make sure that I get it correctly from her. But our next film is Things Remain, and we will be hopping into that right now.
The closest person I know here is gone now, and the only thing I got was her messages. She left suddenly, without any sign of departure. She wrote me, I got very bad news. So my first reaction was to grab my backpack and drive north without stopping, until a frozen lake stood between me and the other land. I stopped there. She wrote me again. It was cold outside. It was wild and quiet, and I was sitting like a tired, rusty object in the pure whiteness. My body was numb, and soon I fell asleep. As I opened my eyes, I saw a herd of deer surrounding my car. I carefully opened the door, but the sound scared them. They turned to look at me again. She wrote me a third time. At that moment, the sun came through the windshield, and there was no sound except the deer's footfall on the snow and the slow movement of eyes on the lake. I decided to stay there. I don't know how long, but don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm not lost. The train runs heavy with the weight of its departure, and I arrive at the last moments, as always.
Still muted. Thank you so much for tuning into that film. Apologies if there were some technical difficulties on any other ends of that, but hopefully the replay worked. We're joined here by Ati. I'm gonna add her. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much for sharing this film with us. Do you
Yeah,
want to
thank you
tell
for
us a bit
sharing.
about it and what the intentions of making it were? I do know that it's an autofiction, so for those of you who don't know, maybe you could describe a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I think the film was kind of, I don't know, I thought it was a slow motion, and the speed of the film was became less than its normal, normal version. But anyway, but thanks for sharing and showing. And yeah, to be faster, I want to read why um, why I made this film from my notes. I mean, about this film, I should say that Things Remain was made when I was in the stage of grieving for a personal loss, an unfortunate experience that caused me to think about my immigration experience more than before. Because of the travel ban, my family and I couldn't visit each other. So the stress and the consequence of a political decision became so present and tangible in my personal life. I started thinking about separation, searching, longing, and at the same time, the sense of rediscovery. I wanted to make a film to bring these concepts that were tightly interwoven with my everyday life and simultaneously make them less about myself, separate myself from the work, and create a fictionalized version of some of these real stories. It was also important to me that the work could communicate beyond the immigration experiences. Since I think being an immigrant does not exclusively mean someone who has left her motherland and moved to another land. Many of us as a human carry a sense of longing with ourselves to some extent, regardless we are moving or we have already settled down. So because of these reasons, oscillating between fiction and non-fiction, the real and manipulated stories was my way to give myself a space for telling the story. To make this film, I approached my collaborator, Carl Elsof, who is a very creative cinematographer and writer. And then we together started shooting that film, and Things Remain was made. Yeah, that's a brief description about the film, and I would be glad to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you so much. I did have some, and like learning and seeing that it was about longing, isolation, and also kind of this experience of loss. I did notice some motifs of like the water and the polar vortex being, and the railroad, like the signs and some of the cinematography that was included in the film. How did you choose to make those different kinds of visual choices in order to allude to some of those emotional feelings that you were trying to convey?
Hmm. Interesting. I think water or railroad kind of they represent transition, and I mean uh, I was feeling the transition, and I was feeling being in between. I mean between two different places, and so I mean all of those visual things for me was the representation of uh, mm, the feeling that I was experiencing. I mean, and or even polar vortex. Uh, I was drawn to that natural occurrence because it is a unique experience. You know, it doesn't happen everywhere, and and mm, and I think for me it was kind of a connection, a metaphor probably with my experience of loss. And loss, I think it happens to all of us, but at the same time when it happens it is unique, you know. And every time you experience a loss, uh, it is kind of unique. It's in own way, and it's different from your past experiences. And so I mean uh, maybe there is no very direct relationship between them, but it was kind of a transition for me. For example, telling the polar vortex, it was transition to tell the story about someone who is tired of being home and gets out of home to be uh, to mm, to be liberated, I mean these all of using all of these visual elements was my own way uh, to um, reflect the story, or reflect the feeling that I was experiencing in a fictionalized form. I don't know. I answered your
No, that
question.
makes sense, especially the bit about water being transitionary as well. And then some of the quotes that I noticed towards the end were really very poetic when you were telling the story about the father that used to mention the stars and whatnot, about night dying in the sky, or choosing to believe the lie rather than face the reality. And I feel like knowing that and thinking about grief as well, it's a way of like coming to the full circle of acceptance and like accepting that grief. Is that what your intentions were in trying to share that, some of those lines or thoughts? What does that line in particular mean to you?
Mm, I mean, uh, again, it was kind of a poetic self-expression uh, for for the experience I mean I faced, and I mean mm, at the end of the film, uh, mm, somehow the narrator, uh, mm, I mean, kind of uh, acknowledge acknowledges she says that about the story, believing a lie is easier than to believe reality. And so I mean it was a way to reflect uh, mm, how the woman in the film was uh, manipulating the real stories uh, to cope with news that she was hearing. I don't know how to say that to don't over project it. And yeah, I mean, uh, it was it was a metaphor for how we manipulate the reality uh, to to face the reality, to could tolerate um, I mean the bitterness of reality. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no, I understand that as well too. And beautiful film, beautiful cinematography, and I loved how we went from the larger screen to the smaller, more intimate square where you had to really focus and look closely and like it's isolated in that place. So thank you so much for sharing this film with us and Ground Floor as well.
sure. And you did a good job in pronouncing my name. I
Oh,
mean,
great. Yes. Thank you, Forrest, for the phonetic spelling as well.
oh,
I'm glad.
Forrest.
Yeah, Forrest has helped me out. So,
Yeah, he already practiced. I mean, we had a panel discussion, and also he did a great job in pronouncing my last name. Yeah,
awesome. I'm
yeah.
so glad. Well, thank you so much, Hattie. We're going to get into our next film and our last one of the program by Forrest. Let me bring that up now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
couple of things that I need to tell you. I'll talk to you soon. Hopefully, this is my last chance to make a phone call tonight.
I feel your pain, my man, and I'm here all the time, and I love you. It's a tough week for me too.
It's not me a thing. Just had you in my mind and wanted to hear your voice.
Sometimes give you a tough day. Thank you. And then I was trying to look for it somewhere, but I couldn't find it. And then it popped up, and I showed it to her. She was dying. She couldn't stop laughing.
Thank you so much for enjoying our last film by Forrest Simmons. Forrest, would you like to share a bit about the film that we just witnessed from you?
Sure. So, I guess I am primarily a photographic artist, and so this is really kind of somewhat of a companion piece to my current photographic body of work, and that's why a lot of it is sort of built around this hybrid of still photography and video. I've, for the last couple of years, been a little obsessed with sort of this idea of creating moving photographs, like sort of distinct from video, but like still photographs that have these moving elements to them. And so this piece is, I'm actually retiring this iteration of it after this screening. Like I really like the idea of it being modular, and so I can sort of take pieces out and put others in their place, and always have it sort of be in this sort of ever-changing, ever-evolving sort of space.
Yeah, that was definitely something that I noticed. I did notice some of the photography elements that were in there. It felt very ethereal, very dreamlike, and also seeing the stills, but the moving images on top of it placed a lot. Can you talk about some of the more technical aspects of putting this film together?
Sure. Yeah, so it's a lot of it is just sort of the result of experimenting with sort of different methods for making this happen. And for me, what that entails with a lot of these is I will sort of plan and execute a still photograph that can also exist as a still photo. It can be like a framed print. And some of these do exist in that way. And so I usually will shoot them on a tripod. And once I have the photograph, actually, once I've captured that, then trying to keep the camera very still, I will then switch it over to video, and I'll actually record some piece of video. I'll have whatever the moving element is, you know, like the person getting out of the truck and running off, and then I will go and make part of the photograph semi-transparent and sort of overlay that on top of the video, so I can have that still photograph in sort of that high resolution that I want a still photograph to be, with this moving element in it as well.
Yeah, I really loved how that came across in the film, and being able to see sort of the color tonality and some of those more dreamlike focuses. Was there any type of significance to the color choice at the very beginning with some of the sunset kind of hues, and how did that relate to the overall context of the film?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I really bring that to consciousness, at least not in the initial sort of creation. Like if I sort of make these individual pieces, these individual photographs, one at a time, not always sort of thinking about how will this ultimately sort of fit into a cohesive whole with the others. That kind of comes after the fact. And so I think the use of color is also sort of the same thing, that I definitely consider color, but it's much more how does color work in the context of this individual photograph. And then later, when I'm sort of assembling them into this form, then those considerations sort of come back into play in how they relate to each other. But I certainly don't have like a full I can't see the end point when I'm creating a lot of these things.
Yeah, definitely. And you said that this is a part of a larger series as well. Can you speak to some of those parts also?
Yeah, so I had this, in the ground floor exhibition, this video was right there alongside a lot of the other still photographs that are part of this body of work. And I really wanted there to be a bit of a seamlessness between them rather than just a feeling of I'm looking at a photograph and now I'm stepping over here and I'm looking at a video. And so I try to bring sort of I think there's sort of a cinematic quality that I look for across the board. And so even in the still photographs that were on display, they were all light boxes and they all sort of have um, that sort of same feeling that you get from looking at like a backlit LED screen. I really feel like I have a pretty deep interest in sort of blurring some of those lines between those two worlds.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And is there any significance in the title as well? I was curious about that.
Yeah, that title is it was something I don't remember writing it down. It was one day I was flipping through a notebook and I had written that phrase down, and I think that to me it is just sort of a poetic look at like the totality of life and existence and the experience of consciousness and sort of all of the attendant beauties and horrors and everything in between that comes with sort of being a sentient being in this life.
Well, thank you so much, Forrest, for sharing more about your film with us today. And thank you to all of the filmmakers for being a part of Ground Floor. I would love to see if anyone from the audience has any questions that they would like to ask about any of the films that we've watched today. And I'm also curious to the artists who participated in Ground Floor. Something that we particularly talked about as a staff was that the film itself, not the film, the pieces in Ground Floor was a great opportunity for us to be able to showcase these works that weren't able to be showcased in a lot of these MFA programs because of the pandemic. So I would love to hear about any of those kind of thought processes behind it and how it felt to be able to be a part of Ground Floor, especially I know it was supposed to come a lot earlier and finally it was able to come up. We are in our final weekend of showcasing this exhibition. And we do have one question, but if anyone wants to add anything about that, any of the artists. We have a question for Forrest. Forrest, you describe yourself as primarily a photographic artist, but the piece suggests interests and influences far beyond photography. Are you sure you are primarily a photographic artist? And can you share some of your non-photographic influences?
Yeah, I actually, in all honesty, as I was saying that, I questioned it a little bit. I say that because my starting point for creating anything usually involves picking up a camera. Yeah, I'm heavily influenced by painting and cinema, and other art forms as well. I think I sort of carry like a very strong sort of Lynchian aesthetic, and I'm really big on a lot of the sort of mid-century abstractionists, the Hilma af Klint show that was so popular at the Guggenheim that everybody saw. I was really heavily moved by that, and Agnes Martin, and so there are a lot of influences well outside of the photographic world for sure.
Awesome. And Kayla says the music reminded her of Twin Peaks also. Great. Do we have any other questions from anyone out in the audience as well? Filmmakers, do you have any final closing thoughts or reflections? Any questions for your fellow filmmakers?
I'll go. Atifa, your writing in your film was really wonderful, and it reminded me of Chris Marker as well as Chantal Ackerman and other filmmakers and artists who have used letter writing as a way of revealing a narrative or a character that's at a distance or separated, even if it's imaginary. And so I guess I just wanted to hear about your writing process and your influences, if you feel like talking about that.
Yeah, sure. Chantal Ackerman was one of those filmmakers that I was really influenced by, and even my thesis writing was about her works. And for example, News from Home by Ackerman was one of those films that I felt really connected. And it's kind of weird when I was watching News from Home. I don't think anyone watched that film and cries, and I was watching that film and I was just crying and crying because I was feeling the essence of her work and how the way she was narrating was very close to my experiences, my aesthetic choices. Yeah, Chris Marker, I think everyone who works in between fiction and non-fiction is influenced by him. And he's a great writer in manipulating and also kind of bringing documentary and probably non-documentary works together and blending them together. Yeah, both of them I was inspired by both of them. And my writing process, I don't know. I cannot say I have spent every day for hours for writing. It comes suddenly, and yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, all right. Thank you all so much for joining us. We don't have any further questions for our artists. I did place the links for all of the videos, but I'll place them again in case they got lost in the chat a bit. Here they are again. Thank you so much, Forrest, Atifa, and Kayla for being with us as well. Yes, I echo Mariela. We have a lot of gratitude for you all being vulnerable, sharing space. It's definitely not easy to share work that you have worked on. And thank you for exhibiting it in Ground Floor as well, and for speaking with us today and spending your Sunday afternoon with us. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and please tune into these videos. We will have the pre-recording of the conversation with the artist with links to the videos up on our YouTube channel this week as well. So if you'd like to check them out again. Thank you all so much and have a great afternoon.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you.